Life for All presents Daily Food Series, Galatians, the Only Gospel, the Gospel of Christ. Title of Book 5, The Cross, the Landmark of the Dispensation of Faith, by Pedro. Week 3, The Rejection of Peter's Ministry and His New Role. Sunday, the new role of Peter, shepherding the dispersed saints. Read with prayer. Peter, an apostle of Jesus Christ, to the pilgrims of the dispersion in Pontus, Galatia, Cappadocia, Asia, and Bithynia. 1 Peter chapter 1, verse 1. After Acts chapter 15, we do not know where Peter went, because the book of Acts no longer records his whereabouts. The meeting mentioned in that chapter, which took place in AD 50, was the last time his presence was noted. However, when he wrote his first epistle, probably in AD 64, 14 years after that meeting, we have a clue about where he ended up. It is not known for sure from where he wrote this letter. But in chapter 5, verse 13, it said that he was in Babylon. Some interpret Babylon as representing Rome. Either way, whether Babylon or Rome, Peter was not in Jerusalem. Why was Peter no longer in Jerusalem? Because there was no longer room for him there. No one listened to the prophetic word anymore, nor did they care about his ministry. That is why he went elsewhere. Peter writes his first epistle to the elect, pilgrims of the dispersion. 1 Peter chapter 1, verse 1. These elect are the believing Jews who were scattered, as explained in Acts chapter 8. Why do we refer to the believing Jews? Because the word dispersion is familiar to the Jews, as they were scattered during the great persecution of the church in Jerusalem. Everyone went to Judea and Samaria, except the apostles. Judea was the province where Jerusalem was located, and Samaria was just to the north. Peter's first epistle records that they had reached Pontus, Galatia, Cappadocia, Asia, and Bithynia, a region known as Asia Minor. Is it not strange that Peter did not write to the believing Jews who were in Jerusalem? Why did he not write to them? Because the church in Jerusalem followed another leadership, that of James. They no longer appreciated Peter's ministry and had returned to circumcision and the observance of the law. On the other hand, Peter did not write to any particular church as if he had opened a work in a specific city and then moved there. He wrote to the believers who were in the dispersion. This shows that he wrote to the believing Jews who had been under his ministry during the first phase of the church in Jerusalem, those who had continued steadfastly in the apostles' teachings and fellowship and had experienced the prosperity of the beginning of the church there, the first 6 years before the persecution. The account of the day of Pentecost confirms this. Acts chapter 2, verses 7 through 10. Those pilgrims who were part of the dispersion, to whom Peter wrote, probably included some from Cappadocia, Pontus, and Asia, who were present on the day of Pentecost. They were converted when Peter preached the word, and possibly some stayed in Jerusalem to live the church life. In Acts chapter 8, when the great persecution began, some went to Judea, others to Samaria, and those who were from Pontus, Cappadocia, Galatia, Asia, and Bithynia returned to their lands. The persecution was so intense that it went beyond the borders of Judea and Samaria and reached other regions. A confirmation of this is in the story of Saul. While he persecuted the church, he did not limit himself to persecuting Christians in these areas, but went as far as Damascus in Syria, a region much farther north, where he had an encounter with the Lord and was converted. In Acts chapter 26, he himself confesses that he persecuted Christians even in foreign cities. Verse 11. In the map below, Jerusalem is far to the south, where the great persecution began. From there, the persecuted Christians fled to various cities in Judea and Samaria. However, the persecution was so intense that it spread to more distant regions, as happened with Saul. In this context, as an alternative, the persecution fled even farther, like to Cappadocia, which is in Asia Minor. It was to these Christians that Peter wrote. Again, his first letter was addressed to the believing Jews who had followed the prophetic word during the first 6 years of the church life in Jerusalem, and who later, in the Dispersion, had gone to Judea and Samaria and eventually reached the region of Asia Minor. This part of the history is being explained to us for the first time because no one has addressed it before. The second epistle of Peter was probably written close to his martyrdom, which occurred in 67 AD, during the persecution under Emperor Nero. Shortly after, Paul was also martyred due to the same persecution, shortly before the destruction of Jerusalem in 70 AD. Due to the lack of the prophetic word, an active channel used by the Lord, the church in Jerusalem no longer followed God's will, but returned to practicing the law. This was not why Christ died. The church was brought forth by Christ to carry out God's will, which is to bring the headship of Christ over all things through the power of the Spirit, coming through the apostles' word. However, Peter's word was silenced, and the church fell into lukewarmness, into the oldness of the letter. Thanks be to the Lord. Peter continued to shepherd those who followed the prophetic word, who lived in the region of Asia Minor. Through Peter's epistles, we gain much revelation about the second phase of the church in Jerusalem, seen in the book of Acts.